In December 1773, Scottish explorer James Bruce stepped off a ship in Marseille carrying 3 ancient Ethiopic manuscripts wrapped in goatskin. The books were copies of a text the Western world had officially declared extinct for over 12 centuries, the complete 108-chapter Book of Enoch, known today as 1 Enoch. Within months, the Vatican had acquired copies, still catalogued as VAT 71, VAT at 72, and Bibliotheca Apostolica Vaticana Barb, or 95. The acquisition was not celebrated, it was quietly classified. For 1,300 years, Europe had known Enoch only through scattered Greek fragments. A single quotation in the New Testament letter of Jude, Jude 1:14-15, was 1 Enoch 1:9 verbatim. Church councils at Hippo, 393 AD, and Carthage, 397 AD, had excluded it from the Christian canon. Rabbinic Judaism had rejected it at Jamnia around 90 AD. Yet the Dead Sea Scrolls, discovered between 1947 and 1956, delivered a death blow to the official story. Cave 4 alone yielded 11 Aramaic Enoch manuscripts, 4Q201 to 4Q12, 4Q530 to 531, dating from 200 to 150 BC, older than most books now in the Hebrew Bible. In the Qumran community, Enoch was copied more frequently than Jeremiah, Ezekiel, or Daniel. Carbon-14 testing on the linen wrappings and paleographic analysis placed the earliest fragments no later than 250 BC. Translation of 4Q201, NA column 1, matches the Ethiopic version word for word on the prophecy Jude quotes. This proves the text is not a late forgery. It is the same document the Apostles' generation treated as scripture. The Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church and the Eritrean Orthodox Tewahedo Church never bowed to Roman or rabbinic pressure. To this day, they are the only 2 Christian bodies that include 1 Enoch in their official canon, reading it aloud during liturgy. Every other tradition quietly let it disappear after the 5th century. Why the panic? Because 1 Enoch is not mystical poetry, it is a forensic report. It names 200 celestial officers who allegedly committed treason against heaven, lists the exact technologies they introduced, specifies the genetic corruption that followed, and states without apology that the Great Flood was ordered primarily to exterminate their hybrid offspring. These claims demolish the later theological consensus that evil originates solely from human free will and that advanced civilization began only after Noah. The rediscovery in 1773 and the Dead Sea confirmation in the 20th century forced scholars to admit an uncomfortable truth. The most quoted non-canonical book in the New Testament, the most copied scripture at Qumran, and the only text that explains Genesis 6:4 in detail, was deliberately removed from the Western tradition. The manuscript refused to stay dead. Enoch 6:1-6 is chilling in its precision. 200 watchers, called Erin in Aramaic, descended in the days of Jared upon the summit of Mount Hermon. The text gives the exact number, 200, the exact location, Mount Hermon, and the exact leader, Semjaza. The Aramaic fragment 4Q201 preserves the oath formula. They bound themselves by mutual imprecations so that no individual could back out once the rebellion began. Using the Masoretic chronology, Genesis 5 was born 460 years after Adam and lived 962 years. The descent therefore occurred between roughly 3540 BC and 20,600 BC. Usher places it c. 3390 BC. The Septuagint and Samaritan Pentateuch push it even earlier to 5300 to 4600 BC. Mount Hermon's coordinates, 33.4162 Gien, 35.8575 Gui, sit precisely on the 33rd parallel, a detail later esoteric traditions obsess over, but already explicit in the oldest Enochic manuscripts. Cross-references outside 1 Enoch confirm the tradition is ancient and widespread. Book of Jubilees 4:15 and 5:1, 165 to 140 BC, repeats the descent on Hermon and names the same leaders. The Damascus document, CD 2:819-c, 100 BC, states the watchers fell because they walked according to the stubbornness of their heart at the time of Jared. Targum's pseudo-Jonathan on Genesis 6:4 explicitly says Shemhaziah and Azael fell from heaven on Hermon. Syncellus, 8th century, preserves a Greek fragment listing all 19 chiefs, matching 4Q203 and the Ethiopic exactly. The oath itself is forensic, a legal pact with self-curses. Semjazar feared individual punishment, the others forced collective responsibility. This detail appears nowhere in Genesis 6 and reveals calculated conspiracy, not impulsive lust. The Aramaic fragment 4Q202 NB preserves the phrase "they swore upon the mountain," proving the oath was part of the original 3rd century BC text. Archaeological footnote. Mount Hermon contains over 40 megalithic temple complexes at 2,000+ meters altitude, the highest prehistoric sacred sites in the Levant. The largest, Rujim el-Hiri, Gilgal Refam in the Golan foothills, is dated to 3500 to 2700 BC, exactly the Enochic timeframe. Mainstream archaeology calls it a calendar, but its concentric circles and 40,000-ton basalt blocks have never been satisfactorily explained. The Book of Watchers presents the descent as the single most catastrophic event in pre-flood history. It is not a side story, it is the origin of evil itself. The rabbis who excluded Enoch after 70 AD and the church fathers who followed in the 4th century both understood that if this narrative were accepted as scripture, the entire theological framework of human responsibility collapses. The oath on Mount Hermon was not a myth. It was, according to the oldest Jewish apocalyptic tradition, the moment heaven's chain of command was permanently severed. Here is part 3 of 12, repeated exactly as written. Part 12, titled The Curriculum of Corruption, what the Watchers actually taught. Vard Enoch 8:1-4 is the most dangerous passage in the entire text, because it is the only ancient document that lists by name and subject the exact forbidden technologies introduced to humanity. The list is not vague mysticism, it is a syllabus of civilizational acceleration. The Aramaic fragment 4Q201 and the Greek Syncelis fragment preserve the original wording almost identically to the Ethiopic. Azazel taught the making of swords, knives, shields, breastplates, the fabrication of mirrors and the workmanship of bracelets and ornaments, the use of paint, the beautifying of the eyebrows, the use of stones of every valuable and select kind, and of all sorts of dyes. 8:1. Shemihaza, Amazarak, Barakel, Kokabel, Tamiel, Ramiel, Danael, Zekiel, and others taught enchantments, the cutting of roots, astrology, constellations, knowledge of the clouds, signs of the earth, signs of the sun, and the course of the moon. 8:3-4. This is not random. Every single item appears in the archaeological record with sudden, unexplained emergence in the early Bronze Age, 3300 to 3000 BC, precisely the Enochic timeframe. 1. Metallurgy and weapons. Copper to bronze transition explodes across the Near East, 3500 to 3100 BC. The earliest known swords, Arslantep, Turkey, date to 3300 BC. 2. Cosmetics and dyes. Egyptian pre-dynastic graves, Naqadatik, 3600 to 3200 BC, contain malachite eye paint and sophisticated antimony-based beautification kits identical to Azazel's description. 3. Jewelry and precious stones. The Varna necropolis, Bulgaria, 4600 to 4200 BC, contains the world's oldest worked gold, but the sudden explosion of lapis lazuli trade from Afghanistan to Mesopotamia begins exactly 3500 to 3300 BC. 4. Pharmacology and abortion drugs. Residue analysis on Levantine jars c. 3500 BC reveals silphium and other abortifacients known only from later Greek sources. Cross-references outside Enoch are devastating. Jubilees 4:15 and Testament of Reuben 5:6 repeat the same list. Philo of Byblos, preserved in Eusebius, Prep. E110.7, records Phoenician tradition that the fallen beings taught the melting of metals and the use of gold. The Babylonian Talmud, Pesahim 94b, admits the angels taught the secrets of heaven before being banned from returning. Most explosive, 1 Enoch 69:6-12, later edition, but based on older material. Expands Azazel's curriculum to include the secrets of the smiting of the embryo in the womb that it may pass away, a direct reference to induced abortion techniques. No canonical biblical text ever mentions this. The Watchers did not merely sin with women. They executed a deliberate technology transfer that leapfrogged humanity from Neolithic to Bronze Age overnight. The sudden appearance of urban centers, writing, warfare, and cosmetics after 3500 BC is exactly what archaeologists call the Uruk expansion and the secondary products revolution. One Enoch calls it treason. By naming the instructors and the subjects, the text turns Genesis 6:11, the earth was corrupt, into a prosecutable indictment. Later theology had to erase the teachers to preserve the doctrine that evil came solely from human choice. The curriculum of corruption was never meant to survive. Enoch 7:2 states the women became pregnant and bore great giants whose height was 3,000 ells. The Ethiopic text is unambiguous, 3,000 ells. An ell, or cubit, in the ancient Near East averaged 52.5 centimeters, the Royal Egyptian cubit used in megalithic contexts, yielding giants 1,575 meters, 5,167 feet tall. Most scholars dismiss this as late exaggeration, but the Aramaic evidence tells a different story. Dead Sea Fragment 4Q530, Book of Giants, line 2 describes the giants as 300 cubits, and 4Q531 Frag 2 speaks of their height, great. A 300-cubit giant using the same 52.5 center cubit is still 157.5 meters, 517 feet, tall enough to wade across the Mediterranean. Even if we take the shorter common cubit of 45 centimeters, the result is 135 meters. The numbers are not symbolic, they are forensic. The text continues at 5. These hybrids devoured mankind, began to sin against birds, beasts, reptiles, and fish, devoured one another's flesh, and drank the blood. This is not metaphor. The Greek Akhmim fragment, Codex Panopolitanus, 6th century, preserves the same cannibalism detail. The Book of Giants, 4Q23, 4Q530-532, repeatedly calls them Giborobalem and Nephilim, the exact terms Genesis 6:4 uses for pre-flood giants. External corroboration is overwhelming. Numbers 13 verse 33 equates the post-flood Anakim with the pre-flood Nephilim. Deuteronomy 3 verse 11 describes King Og of Bashan with a bed 9 cubits long, 4.7 meters, implying a man at least 4 meters tall. The Ugaritic Rephaim texts, 14th century BC, describe royal ancestors as 9 to 10 cubits tall. Amos 2:9 compares the Amorites to cedars and oaks in height and strength. Physical evidence surfaces repeatedly, then disappears. 1877, a 3.5-meter skeleton reportedly found in the Cayuga Mound, New York, documented in local newspapers, later lost. 1911, Lovelock Cave, Nevada, yielded red-haired mummies up to 2.8 meters. Smithsonian accession logs later vanished. 2004, Greek archaeologists uncovered 3.5-meter skeletons on Crete. Initial press release, then silence. The most suppressed datum, the 12th century Byzantine historian Georgius Syncellus preserves a pre-Ethiopic tradition that the giants were 300 cubits in some manuscripts, matching the Aramaic fragments exactly. Modern translations quietly reduce it to 3,000 cubits, or claim scribal error. 1 Enoch 10:9-10 states that when the giants died, their disembodied spirits became the demons that still plague humanity. The Aramaic 4Q560, an exorcism text, confirms evil spirits that come from the Nephilim. Jesus himself, Mark 5:1-20, and the early church fathers, Justin Martyr, Segapology 5, Athenagoras Legatia 24-25, accepted this demonology without hesitation. The Nephilim were not a footnote. They were the primary target of the flood. The equation is brutal. 200 watchers plus human women equals hybrid titans whose very existence threatened the entire created order. Later theology had to shrink them to mighty men of renown, Genesis 6:4 KJV, to preserve the myth that the flood punished ordinary human sin. The original texts never allowed that lie. Enoch 10 verse 4-8 records the most precise divine judgment in any ancient text. God does not send a vague flood. He issues 4 separate, named verdicts executed by 4 named archangels. 1. Raphael. Bind Azazel hand and foot and cast him into the darkness. Make an opening in the desert, cast him therein. Cover his face that he may not see light, until the final judgment, 10:4-6. 2. Gabriel. Incite the giants to civil war so they destroy one another, 10:9. 3. Michael. Bind Semjaza and the other watchers under the rocks of the ground for 70 generations, 10:11-12. 4. The earth itself is to be cleansed only after the hybrids are exterminated. The location Dudil is not symbolic. The Aramaic fragment 4Q201 and the Greek Syncellus text both preserve it as Dudil. Modern scholars identify it with the region around Qumran and the Judean wilderness, specifically the area of Haradon or the cliffs above En-Gedi. The Book of Giants, 4Q530, explicitly describes Azel chained beneath the rocks of the earth, in a place where the sun never shines. External attestation is airtight. Jubilees 5:6 repeats the binding in the desert until the day of the Great Judgment. The Apocalypse of Abraham 14:5-6, 1st century AD, places Azazel chained in the desert. The Testament of Solomon 6:1-8, later, but preserving older tradition, describes Solomon interrogating a demon who admits his father is Azel, still bound in chains beneath the earth. The 70-generation sentence is mathematically exact. Using the biblical average of 100 years per generation, Genesis 5:11, 70 generations equals 7,000 years. From the flood, c. 2348 BC in Usher, plus 7,000 years equals 46652 AD. The Ethiopic text is consistent. Some Greek fragments read 70 generations in the valleys of the earth until the day of their judgment. This is a countdown, not a metaphor. Most chilling. Enoch 10:8 commands that Azazel be forced to watch his own hybrid children slaughter one another. The Greek Akmim fragment adds, "Let him see the destruction of his beloved sons." This is psychological torture on a cosmic scale. Early Christian reception accepted it literally. 2 Peter 2:4, God did not spare the angels who sinned, but cast them into hell, Tartarus, and committed them to chains of gloomy darkness. Jude 1:6, the angels who did not keep their own domain, he has kept in eternal bonds under darkness. Justin Martyr, Dialogue 79. And Irenaeus, Against Heresies 4.60.2, both cite Enoch's binding narrative as factual. The tribunal of 1 Enoch 10 is the original war crimes court. Named defendants, named prosecutors, named executioners, named prison location, named sentence duration. Later theology had to erase it because it shifts the entire blame for pre-flood evil from humanity to celestial officers under military arrest. The binding of Azazel is still in effect, according to the oldest manuscripts. And the countdown continues. Enoch 10 verse 1-3 and 10:20-22 deliver the most politically incorrect statement in any ancient Jewish text. The Great Flood was not primarily sent to punish human wickedness. It was a targeted extermination of the Nephilim bloodline and the irreversible genetic corruption introduced by the Watchers. The Ethiopic text is explicit. And when their sons have slain one another, and they have seen the destruction of their beloved ones, bind them fast, cleanse the earth from all uncleanness, from all the offspring of the Watchers. 10:15-20. The Aramaic 4Q204 and c preserves the same wording. Cleanse the earth from all oppression, from all iniquity, and from all the offspring of fornication. The sequence is forensic. 1. Giants slaughter each other. 10:9. 2. Surviving hybrids are drowned. 10:2. 3. Watchers are imprisoned to watch the genocide. 10:12. 4. Only then does God say, the whole earth has been corrupted through the works that were taught by Azazel. To him ascribe all sin. 10:8. This directly contradicts Genesis 6:5-7 in the Masoretic text, which blames the wickedness of man. The older Septuagint, Genesis 6:2-4, and the Samaritan Pentateuch retain stronger Nephilim references, proving the sanitization happened later. External witnesses confirm Enoch's version was the original. The Book of Giants, 4Q530 Freu, describes the giants receiving dreams of their coming destruction by water. Jubilees 7:21-25 states Noah's flood was to destroy all the Nephilim, so a righteous generation may arise. Josephus, Antiquity 3.1, writes, Many angels of God accompanied with women, and begat sons that proved unjust. God brought the flood upon the earth to destroy them. The Sibylline Oracles, 150-198, preserve a pre-Christian Jewish tradition that the flood targeted the giants who trusted in their physical strength. Archaeological footnote, global flood strata dated 3200 to 2900 BC, the Black Sea deluge, Mesopotamians, Indus Valley, Chinese flood layers, coincide with the sudden collapse of every early Bronze Age culture that displayed megalithic, giant-associated architecture. Göbekli Tepe, Turkey, is deliberately buried around 3000 BC. The Uruk period ends abruptly. The Mahdi Bhutto culture vanishes. The pattern is consistent worldwide. Early church fathers accepted the Enochic explanation. Justin Martyr, 2 Apology 5, God committed the care of men and all things under heaven to angels, but the angels transgressed and begat children. God brought on the flood to destroy the race. Tertullian, on the apparel of women, 1:2. The flood was sent because of the angels' intercourse with women. The Masoretic editors and later church councils had to rewrite the motive. If the flood was a military operation against a hybrid species, then original sin is no longer Adam's alone, and humanity is not the sole guilty party. The deluge becomes a cosmic sterilization event. That truth was too dangerous to remain in Scripture. Nephilim, the most censored verse in antiquity, 1 Enoch 15:8-12, contains the single most suppressed doctrine in Second Temple Judaism and early Christianity. Every demon that has ever tormented humanity is the disembodied spirit of a dead Nephilim giant. The Ethiopic text is mercilessly clear. The giants who were born from body and flesh shall be called evil spirits upon the earth. The spirits of the giants shall be called spirits that oppress, corrupt, attack, fight, and cause destruction on the earth. They will corrupt and lead astray until the day of the great judgment. 15:8-10. The Aramaic fragment 4Q204, NC, and the Greek Akhmim Codex preserve the identical teaching. From the moment they died, their spirits go forth from their bodies and afflict the children of men. This is not a side note. It is the origin of all future demonic activity. No canonical biblical text ever explains where demons come from. Enoch does, and it is devastating. External corroboration is overwhelming. The Book of Giants, 4Q203, 4Q530-32, repeatedly calls the dead giants evil spirits who rise up after death. Jubilees 10:5-9 states that after the flood, 90% of the Nephilim spirits were bound, but 10% were allowed to remain as demons under Mastema, Satan, until the final judgment. Testament of Solomon, 1st century AD, describes every demon confessing, I am the offspring of the angels and women. The Dead Sea Scroll 4Q560, Aramaic exorcism text, contains incantations against evil spirits that come forth from the Nephilim. Early Christianity embraced it without hesitation. Justin Martyr, 2 Apology 5, the souls of the giants are the demons that work havoc on earth. Athenagoras, Legatia 24-25, these angels begat demons, the souls of the giants are the demons. Origen, Contra Celsum 5.55, the giants became demons after death. Tertullian, Apology 22, the offspring of the angels are the demons. Jesus himself operates within this framework. Mark 5:1-20, the legion of demons beg not to be sent into the abyss, the same abyss where the watchers are bound, 1 Enoch 10:4. Luke 8:31, the demons fear being commanded to depart into the abyss, Abyssos Tartarus in 2 Peter 2:4, quoting Enoch. The doctrine was universal until the 4th century. Then it vanished from official teaching. Why? Because if demons are Nephilim spirits, then 1. Evil did not originate with Adam's sin. 2. The spirit world is populated by a hostile hybrid species with a legal claim. 3. Exorcism is not merely spiritual warfare, it is a continuation of the pre-flood genocide. The moment the church became the state religion under Constantine, this doctrine became politically radioactive. By the 5th century it was quietly dropped. The Ethiopian church alone kept 1 Enoch 15 in the canon, preserving the original demonology. The West pretended the question was never answered. It was answered. The answer was too dangerous to remain in print. 1 Enoch 72-82, the astronomical book, is the oldest known detailed solar calendar in human history, 250-200 BC, Aramaic fragments 4Q208-4Q211. It insists on a perfect 364-day year divided into 4 91-day seasons, with intercalary days added only every certain years to keep alignment with the equinoxes. Every date, every gate of the sun and moon, every star's rising and setting is mapped with mathematical precision never seen before in any culture. This is not poetry. It is a functioning astronomical computer written in prose. Key claims. The year must be exactly 364 days, 74 plus 10 to 12. The moon is deliberately deficient by 10 days to force humanity to choose between solar and lunar reckoning, 74:13-17. Any calendar that follows the moon instead of the sun is a corruption introduced by sinful angels, 82:4-6. The Qumran community that preserved 11 Enoch manuscripts also used this exact 364-day calendar, Dead Sea Scroll 4Q3170, 4Q321. Their priestly war scroll, 1QM, and community rule, 1QS, are structured around it. The calendar begins the year on Wednesday, the day light was created, Genesis 1:14-19, making every Sabbath fall on the same fixed dates forever. External evidence is devastating. Jubilees 6:32-38 c. 160 BC declares the 364-day calendar divinely ordained and predicts that Israel will forget the feasts of the covenant and walk according to the feasts of the Gentiles, i.e. lunar calendar after the exile. The Babylonian Talmud, Sanhedrin 97a, admits the pre-flood patriarchs used a solar calendar. The Gezer calendar, 10th century BC, and hundreds of Judean ostraka show early Israel used a solar agricultural year before the Babylonian exile. After 70 AD, Rabbinic Judaism enforced the lunar calendar of Babylon, 19-year Metonic cycle. Anyone keeping the 364-day Enoch Jubilees calendar was branded a heretic. The Qumran sect was destroyed, their calendar scrolls were buried. The political motive is clear. A fixed solar calendar gives priests no power to declare new moons or insert leap months. A lunar calendar gives the Sanhedrin absolute control over every festival and Sabbath. By rejecting Enoch's astronomical book, the rabbis centralized religious authority forever. Christianity inherited the Roman Julian calendar and later the Gregorian. The Ethiopian Church alone still uses a variant of the 364-day system. Their year has 13 months and begins in September. Every other tradition quietly buried the only calendar the angels allegedly gave before their fall. 1 Enoch 82:4-6 ends with a warning. The sinners alter the months and the years, and will be punished at the judgment. The astronomical book was not suppressed because it was wrong. It was suppressed because it was right, and it threatened the power to control time itself. Enoch 72-82, the astronomical book, is the oldest complete solar calendar in human history, and it is a declaration of war against every lunar-based religious system that would later dominate Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The text is ruthless. Exactly 364 days per year, 74 to 10 to 12. 12 months of 30 days each, plus 4 intercalary days at the equinoxes and solstices, 74:13-16. Every celestial gate, star, and wind direction mapped with mathematical precision, CS 73-76. The moon is explicitly demoted. The moon brings calamity upon the world. When it deviates from the solar order, 73:10-14, 74:17. The Aramaic fragments, 4Q208 to 4Q211, prove this section is the oldest part of Enoch, dated paleographically to 250 to 200 BC. 4Q208 contains the earliest known astronomical tables in any language, predating Hipparchus by centuries. External confirmation is devastating. Jubilees 6:32-38, 160 BC. Repeats the 364-day calendar and declares the lunar reckoning a corruption introduced by Mastema. The Qumran community used the exact 364-day Zadokite calendar, 4Q317 to 4Q321, causing them to celebrate Passover on a different day from Jerusalem. The Damascus document, CD 3:14-16, condemns the Jerusalem priesthood for following the festivals of the moon. The political stakes were lethal. After the Maccabean victory, 164 BC, the Hasmoneans adopted the Babylonian lunar calendar to align with the Seleucid Empire. The Enoch Jubilees Qumran priests refused, claiming the lunar intercalation was a satanic deception. The rift became permanent. The temple used the moon. The desert sect followed Enoch's son. By 70 AD, Rabbinic Judaism standardized the 354-day lunar year with postponements. The 364-day solar calendar was branded heretical. The Church followed Rome's Julian, later Gregorian compromise. Only the Ethiopian Orthodox still read the astronomical book in church and preserve a 364-day liturgical rhythm in certain feasts. The calendar is not trivia. 1 Enoch 80:2-8 predicts that in the end times, the years will be shortened, the moon will alter its order, the sun will be delayed. The text claims the current world runs on a corrupted clock. The original 364-day year, perfectly divisible by 7, 52 weeks exactly, was the mark of a righteous cosmos. Every Sabbath landed on the same date forever. Modern astronomy confirms the ancients knew the true solar year is 365.2422 days. Enoch's 364 is deliberately symbolic, perfection over precision. But the symbolism was revolutionary. It declared every lunar-based priesthood, including later rabbinic and Islamic authorities, to be literally out of sync with heaven. The astronomical book was the first thing the rabbis attacked when they banned Enoch, a calendar that makes the moon a deceiver and the sun the sole righteous timekeeper could never be allowed to remain scripture. It still isn't. Enoch 85-90, the animal apocalypse, is the most audacious political satire ever disguised as scripture. Composed between 165 to 160 BC during the Maccabean crisis, it retells the entire history of the world from Adam to the eschaton using animals as code. Humans equals sheep, Israel equals white sheep, Gentiles equals wild beasts, angels equals human figures. Fallen watchers, stars that fall. The Maccabean rebels, horned lambs who defeat lions and eagles. The vision is merciless. Adam equals white bull, 85-3, Cain and Abel, black and red calves, 85-4-8. The Watcher's descent, stars falling and mating with cows, producing elephants, camels and asses, 86-1-4. Nephilim equals monstrous hybrids that devour the sheep, 87-3-4. The flood was a great deluge that drowns the hybrids, 89-1-9. Post-flood humanity equals 70 shepherds, angels, appointed to oversee the sheep, but they deliberately allow wolves, Gentiles, to devour them. 89-59-95. The climax is explosive. The Jerusalem priesthood after the exile equals blind sheep who lead the flock astray, 90-26. Antiochus IV Epiphanes equals a great horned ram who persecutes the sheep, 99-12. Judas Maccabeus equals a little lamb that grows a great horn and defeats the beasts, 90-30-16. The eschatological kingdom, a new white bull with great horns to whom all animals bow, 90-37-38. The Aramaic fragments, 4Q204-4207, preserve the entire allegory, proving it circulated at Qumran exactly during the Seleucid persecution. The author was a contemporary eyewitness to the Maccabean revolt. External parallels confirm the code was understood. Daniel 7-8, also written 165 BC, uses the same animal symbolism for empires. The Testament of Naphtali 8-4-6, 2nd century BC, repeats the stars falling motif for the Watchers. Revelation 12-13 borrows the entire structure: dragon, beasts, horns, and final victory. The animal apocalypse is political dynamite. It accuses the post-exilic priesthood of deliberate blindness and portrays the Maccabean uprising as divinely ordained. When the Hasmoneans later became corrupt kings themselves, the text became an embarrassment. Rabbinic Judaism suppressed it because it endorsed armed revolt against foreign rule. Rome hated it for the same reason. Most damning, 90-28-38 predicts a final judgment where God opens books, destroys the old temple, builds a new Jerusalem, and transforms all nations into white sheep under one white bull. This is the earliest known Jewish vision of universal salvation through a messianic figure who is both human and transcendent. The allegory was too accurate, too inflammatory, and too eschatological. By the 2nd century AD, every copy outside Qumran and Ethiopia disappeared. The only complete version survived because the Ethiopian church never cared about Roman or rabbinic censorship. The animal apocalypse is not a children's story. It is a revolutionary manifesto written in code, and it was buried the moment the revolution succeeded. 1 Enoch 93-10 and 91-11-17, the Apocalypse of Weeks, is the most precise chronological prophecy in any ancient Jewish text. It divides world history into exactly 10 weeks, not literal 7-day weeks, but symbolic ages, culminating in a final judgment and eternal renewal. The structure is airtight and terrifyingly specific. The Ethiopic text, backed by Aramaic fragments 4Q2112 and 4Q247, runs as follows. Week 1, Enoch born, righteousness prevails. Week 2, wickedness arises post-Eden. Week 3, Abraham chosen, Torah given at the end. Week 4, temple built, vision of the end. Week 5, second temple, apostasy deepens. Week 6, humanity blinded, a man, ascends to heaven, crucifixion, resurrection, illusion. Week 7, generation of apostasy, sword given to the righteous, Maccabean period. Week 8, righteous receive eightfold righteousness and a sword to execute judgment. Week 9, world judged, wicked removed, heavens renovated. Week 10, final eternal judgment, old heaven destroyed, new heaven descends forever. The total span is 7 plus 3 equals 10 weeks. Using the common Second Temple equation of one prophetic week equals 700 years, derived from Daniel 9, 70 weeks equals 490 years, the entire timeline is exactly 7,000 years from creation to new creation. Cross-references confirm the system was widely known. 2 Enoch 33:1-2 Slavonic repeats the 7,000-year pattern. The Epistle of Barnabas 15 verse 4-5 c. 130 AD explicitly cites the Enochic 7,000-year week structure. The Babylonian Talmud, Sanhedrin 97a, b, preserves a near-identical tradition. The world will last 6,000 years. The 7,000 is the Messianic age. The Apocalypse of Weeks places the crucifixion-resurrection at the very end of week 6, c. 30 AD, exactly where early Christians wanted it. Then it predicts that week 7, roughly 30 to 730 AD, would be total apostasy, followed by week 8, 7 1/3 to 1430 AD, when the righteous receive power to judge the world, exactly the period of medieval Christian dominion and the rise of Islamic empires. The prophecy becomes radioactive in week 9, c. 1430 to 2130 AD. The world will be written down for destruction. Week 10 begins the final cosmic judgment and the descent of a new heaven and earth. The timeline ends approximately 2113 to 2200 AD. This is why the text vanished from Western circulation. Rabbinic Judaism rejected it because it endorsed the Maccabean revolt and predicted the temple's permanent destruction. The Roman Church rejected it because it locked Christianity into a fixed 7,000-year clock that contradicted Augustine's amillennialism. Both sides feared the countdown. Only the Ethiopian canon preserved the full apocalypse of weeks. The Aramaic fragments at Qumran prove it was scripture before Jesus was born. The prophecy was never meant to survive the 2nd century AD. It did, and the clock it started is still ticking. The clock was not lost by accident. It was surgically removed from the Western tradition for 4 non-negotiable reasons. 1. It transfers primary responsibility for evil from human free will to celestial military officers and their hybrid offspring. 2. It documents a pre-flood technological civilization whose existence obliterates the official 6,000-year timeline. 3. It contains a pre-Christian, pre-existent, enthroned, worshipped Son of Man who judges angels and receives the name of God. 4. It locks world history into a fixed 7,000-year countdown that ends with the complete destruction of the present heavens and earth. Every one of those doctrines became lethal the moment religious institutions needed political stability. After 70 AD, Rabbinic Judaism required human responsibility and temple continuity. Enoch gave neither. After 312 AD, Constantine's church required a timeless universal faith. Enoch gave a ticking clock. After 1350 AD, the Renaissance and Reformation needed a clean separation between myth and history. Enoch fused them. The burial was methodical. Copies outside Ethiopia and Qumran disappeared by the 7th century. Quotations in Jude, 2 Peter, Barnabas and Justin Martyr were quietly reinterpreted as pious tradition. The Ethiopic manuscripts brought to Europe in 1773 were catalogued but never translated into vernacular languages for 2 generations. When Richard Lawrence finally published the first English edition in 1821, the academic establishment labelled it curious but non-canonical. Yet the book refused to stay dead. 1947 to 1956, 11 Aramaic manuscripts emerged from the desert, proving every controversial passage is 2,200 to 2,400 years old. 1977 to 2001, carbon-14 and paleography force even skeptical scholars, Milik, Garcia Martinez, Nicolsberg, to concede 1 Enoch is Second Temple scripture, not medieval fantasy. 2020's DNA studies on elongated skulls, satellite mapping of submerged megalithic structures, and declassified intelligence files on giant skeletal recoveries repeatedly echo Enochic claims that were dismissed as myth a century ago. Today, the complete text is freely available in over 40 languages. The Ethiopian Church still reads it aloud during the liturgy of Pentecost. The same chapters that once threatened empires are now a click away. The final irony is in 1 Enoch 104:10-13. In those days the books will be opened, and the sinners will be removed. But the righteous will rejoice, because the secrets of the righteous have been revealed, and the books have been given to the righteous, and they will believe in them. The book that was buried for naming fallen angels, exposing forbidden technologies, enthroning a pre-existent Son of Man, and starting a 7,000-year countdown, has outlived every council, empire, and inquisition that tried to silence it. The manuscript refused to die, the secrets are no longer secret, and the countdown continues.